Virginia, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this important meeting. It's interesting, as a freshman member of this committee, to sort of do the learning curve on Africa in particular, and certain trends have emerged in my observations. But first, let me thank our panelists. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Yamamoto's service goes all the way back to oversight of the tragic events in Tiananmen Square, and Ms. Anderson served, and I will thank you for your service in the Peace Corps, putting a good face on America for the remainder of the world, and I think an investment that a lot of my colleagues undervalue as it relates to ROI and the opinion of America that people across the world who might otherwise only get that opinion from mass media have, and that's so important, so thank you for that. I don't want anybody to break out in laughter when I ask this question, but as we work towards hopefully free, fair, and transparent elections in Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, what can we say we're doing to ensure that the Chinese influence over the electoral process doesn't tilt the scales in a direction that would be to the benefit of the Chinese? And that's an open question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Congressman. We've looked at the in our coordination with the international community, and we do hold annual discussions with the Chinese specifically on what they're doing in Africa, and we're trying to steer not only China but all these countries to play a helpful, supportive role. The other area, too, that we have concerns is, of course, the exploitation of resources in eastern Congo. That's
my next question.
That is the area that we've been working on very long and hard, is that the people of the Congo need to benefit from the resources. There has to be a rational process in whereby you develop these resources. And one of the things is that looking at your question, is that we do discuss with the Chinese on a whole spectrum aspect, and not just China, it's all the other countries that are involved, positively and negatively, in the DRC.
Ms. Anderson, if you want to, and if you don't want to, then I'll keep going.
I guess I would just say, if you're referring to the elections and our involvement related to the Chinese, we're focusing on local capacity, and we're working so that the Congolese can be prepared to participate in their election and hold their own government accountable, so that they can start to be able to define their own future. And that's the role that we're playing in the elections.
And that's
quite different from the Chinese.
Right, and so that's something that's noteworthy here, as we as Americans recognize that perhaps American, dare I say, overreach globally has manifested itself in ways that we didn't anticipate, that there are certain types of aid that are greatly appreciated and others that are taken because they're aid, but that come with a backlash, if you will. There's a vacuum, I think, inherently created, and the Chinese are all too happy to fill it. Pardon me, I'm going to do soliloquy for a second here. I've not spent a ton of time on the ground in Africa, but I did speak to a ranking member of a North African country, and the entire presidential palace, that I would say probably rivals the Cannon House office building in square footage, was built by China. They built a palace. And when you get off the airport, and you served in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, which is a dynamic country where if we get it right, great things will happen, and if we don't, tragic things will happen. You almost feel like you're at a Chinese annex, and the Chinese record of exploitation of individuals is apparent even from 2007 in the DRC as it relates to exploitation of child labor, as it relates to the monopolization of the mineral deposits in DRC in particular, which, if properly levied, should make the DRC one of the most prosperous nations on the planet. The Chinese efforts are historically and demonstrably towards ensuring a Chinese access to things like tungsten and tantalum and coltan and cobalt that have manufacturing applications in anything from lithium-ion batteries to jet phone or jet engine components. And I get it, except what we're trying to do is empower the people in the DRC to be the leaders of the people in the DRC, and without a combative tone and understanding that there is a global economic struggle afoot, and the Chinese are extraordinarily strong competitors therein, how do we ensure the power in Congo goes to the Congolese, that our monies that are spent aren't converted by way of Chinese exploitation of stability that we help create to enrich the Chinese at the expense, literally, of the poorest and weakest people in places like the DRC. I'm asking for suggestions because I don't know the answer. Understanding that we don't want to take a combative stance, but that my primary function on this committee is, to the extent that it's relevant and possible for the United States to create a better circumstance for human rights, to do so. How do we do that without empowering the Chinese to continue exploitative practices?
I think that it's a very difficult question in a very complex situation. The issue is that we talk, it's not just the Chinese, but it's a lot of countries, outside countries. There's a lot of regional states as well that's exploiting those resources. And of course, our efforts is to ensure that we monitor, we hold people accountable, and we look at how these resources are being distributed and find mechanisms and ways that the people of the Congo can benefit from those resources. In our annual discussions, since your question is on China, is that we do have we're coming up to another annual discussions with China to see where they can play a helpful role. In the past, they've done an engineering battalion in Sudan. They've done road construction to AID and U.S. projects. So looking and seeing where we can have areas of commonality and then areas where we do not, is how do we make